I'm John Fraser Valley Conservancy. Today I'm on one of our protected properties here in Abbotsford, British Columbia, habitats of the endangered Oregon forest snail. In my last video we talked a little bit about gardening with native plants, why you should incorporate native plants in your garden, and how they can be a benefit to both you and nature. And today we're going to talk about some specific plants that you can incorporate into your garden here in southwestern British Columbia. First, let's talk about some native plants for a sunny location. This is a location that receives at least 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. Think of a garden facing south or one in an open area. One of my favorite plants for a sunny location is the tall Oregon grape. They got bright yellow flowers that will bloom early in the spring and act as a food source to pollinators, while their blue berries will feed birds and other wildlife in the fall. They have attractive evergreen foliage that adds color to your garden all winter, and they're drought tolerant and quite easy to care for. They'll grow up to 2.5 meters or about 8 feet tall on average, but I have seen them grow taller, and they like to spread through underground root parts and they'll fill a space. A nice native shrub for a sunny location is the mock orange. They have fragrant white flowers that bloom in early spring, but they'll last a little longer into summer. They act as a great food source to pollinators, especially bees. They prefer full sun, but they can handle some shade, and they're drought tolerant and quite easy to care for. They grow up to 3 meters tall, but they usually stay closer to 2, which is around 6 feet. Now if you're looking for a spreading ground cover, the stonecrop sedum is a good choice. These again like full sun, and they'll have bright yellow flowers from June to July. Stonecrop sedum has very low water requirements, and they do very well in a rock garden. If you're looking for a sunny flowering perennial, you can go with the Douglas aster. These will bloom from June to August and beyond. I've actually seen them start blooming as early as late May and right into October. They prefer a little bit of moisture, and they'll grow to be about 90 centimeters, about 3 feet tall. And bees love Douglas asters. Every time I see them, they're covered in bees. Another spreading ground cover you can add to your garden is the kinnikinick. There's lots of nice features to your garden all year round, starting with small white blooms in the spring, which become berries in the fall, which remain on the plants right into winter, feeding wildlife. In the fall, you not only have the berries, but you also get some nice red coloration on the leaves. Kinnikinick's a pretty resilient plant. They prefer full sun, but they'll tolerate some shade. They also prefer some moisture, but will tolerate some drier conditions as well. Here's a few more plants you can plant in a sunny location. Alright, since I know we don't have bright sunny gardens, let's talk about a few shade plants. A shady garden receives less than 6 hours of direct sunlight per day, and for this video I'm including both full shade, which is 0 to 3 hours of sunlight, and part shade or part sun, often used interchangeably, which is 3 to 6 hours of direct sunlight per day. So if you're looking for something that'll feed pollinators in your moist, shady location, you can choose goat's beard. In early summer, they get white plumes of blooms, which can push up to about 2 meters or 6 feet tall, and they eventually become seeds that birds will eat as a winter food source. In this part of the world, we have a pretty wide selection of ground covers for a shady site. One good example is wood sorrel. Its shamrock type leaves will quickly fill a site, and white to pink flowers from spring into summer will attract bees and other pollinators. If you have a site that doesn't get much direct sunlight and you're not sure what else to grow, and if it's quite moist, you can try deer fern. Deer fern will stay green throughout the year and provide some color in your garden throughout the winter. The glossy foliage also provides cover for wildlife throughout the year, but especially in the winter when there's little else. They also seem to do pretty well in a pot and can make a decent houseplant. Another plant for a shady, moist garden is false Solomon seal. Its flowers provide an early food source for pollinators, with berries that follow, which are enjoyed by birds. False Solomon seal can grow up to 100 centimeters, which is about 3 feet tall. It spreads slowly by rhizomes underground, and it will eventually create clumps, which can be divided and spread to other gardens. Of course, there are many other native choices for Shady BC garden. Next, let's talk about some plants for hummingbirds. Hummingbirds like plants with lots of sweet nectar, and they really benefit from ones that bloom early in the spring when there's not much else to eat. For the same reason, all these plants also benefit other pollinators such as bees. The first hummingbird-friendly plant I want to talk about is the red flowering currant. This is one of the first plants to bloom in the year, usually in March, but sometimes as early as late February. The red flowers are an important food source for hummingbirds and other pollinators because they bloom so early. Songbirds and small mammals sometimes eat the seeds. If you plant them in your garden, put them somewhere that's full sun to part sun, and they'll tolerate some pretty dry conditions once they get established. Another plant that's full of nectars for hummingbirds is the Pacific bleeding heart. These flowers bloom in early spring, right into summer, and they grow in shady locations, so if you plant them in your garden, make sure it's nice and shady. They grow up to 47 centimeters, which is a little over a foot, sometimes even taller. These are pretty common understory plants in the forest, and they like to spread and they'll easily fill a space. Another spring blooming native plant that you can plant for hummingbirds is the red columbine. Plant red columbine in a shady location that gets lots of moisture. You can expect them to stay fairly small. The flower stalks will grow up to 80 centimeters, which is 2.5 feet. They readily self-seed, and you can expect more of them every year. The ossoberry, or Indian plum, is a shade-loving shrub that benefits hummingbirds. They have small white flowers that are one of the earliest indicators of spring, which become fruit that are favorite of some birds and other wildlife. In your garden, the changing leaves will add some color to your fall landscape. Make sure you plant it in a dry to moist site. In nature, they tend to be an understory shrub that grows in more shady locations, but I have seen them doing quite well with a little bit more sun. Here's some other native plants that you can put into your garden to keep hummingbirds and other pollinators in mind. Finally, let's talk about some edible berries that will benefit not only wildlife, but you as well. A tasty example is the salmonberry. This is a thicket-forming understory shrub that provides hiding space for all sorts of wildlife. They have to grow in kind of moist locations with full sun to some dappled shade. You often find them growing along streams and near other wetlands. The pink flowers in spring become delicious edible fruit enjoyed by people and wildlife alike. Planted in your garden, you can expect salmonberry to grow up to be about 3 meters or 10 feet tall and spread. I like to pick a few of these every year. One year I made jam and it was excellent. Highly recommend. Another native species with edible berries is salal. Salal was an important food source for the native people of the West Coast, who would pick the berries and eat them raw, or smash them up and dry them into cakes and store them for the winter. In your garden, salal can be a versatile understory shrub that will grow in most locations, although they do prefer some shade. These small flowers bloom in the spring and become fruit that will ripen by late summer and into fall. They're not only edible for us, of course, birds and small mammals also enjoy the berries. Salal can be fairly slow growing, but they will eventually form a thicket, and foliage will provide habitat for wildlife all year round. And finally, we have the thimbleberry. Thimbleberry gets white flowers in the spring and early summer. Later in the summer, these become the edible berries that are tasty for us to eat, as well as enjoyed by birds and other animals. If you're planting these at home, plant them somewhere that's nice and sunny. They will tolerate some shade. Be careful though, they do spread quite aggressively and can take over a site. Once they get established, they can tolerate some pretty dry conditions, and you can expect them to grow to be about 2 meters or 6 feet tall. There are many plants that grow here that were eaten long before it was called British Columbia. Here's just a handful that you can add to your garden. Here in southwestern British Columbia, we're very fortunate to be surrounded with an abundance of biodiversity. This has been just a few of the many native plants that you could incorporate into your home garden. They'll be of benefit to both you and wildlife. Thanks for watching and happy gardening.